So, yeah, I'm Kyungja Jung and originally from South Korea. I'm passionate of this topic, and I mentioned earlier before this event start, I was the major founding member of first Rape Crisis Center in South Korea. Since then, I did a PhD uh, on the same topic, like a feminist practice between South Korea and Australia. And also, yeah, I'm involved in a number of activism related to gender violence and violence against women. And currently I'm working on the sexual violence against international students. So based on media data, longitudinal media data, but I haven't finished. So yes, so first of all, it is a great honor to be part of this important event. And yeah, so whenever, wherever, the feminist groups and young women's group organize this kind of event, I can't say no, because this is, where my, blood is boiling and I'm very passionate about. Yes, so back to my topic. So, and also thank you for Professor Ho, the kind introduction about me. And anytime you stop me, so because I can't see your audience a bit, so feel a bit weird. Mm. Yes, a bit of background, because today I'm talking about the new emerging or emerging the feminist, young feminist activism, or even young women's activism in the context of like a digital era. So a bit of information, background information, South Korean women's movement. So in South Korea from the mid-90s, the exerted effort of women's movement have brought significant institutional change, like legal reforms and some programs in gender equality and related legislations and programs. But very ironically, young women have kept their distance from so-called institutionalized movement. So with the successful mobilization of the idea of post-feminism, and as you all know that they promoted the notion that the women's movement was a thing of the past, and there is a wide the spread of perception among young people that feminism is not necessary or relevant. So a lack of enthusiasm about feminism or women's movement or even gender studies and women's studies. And so there was difficulty, like a women's movement. One time when I was part of a women's movement is a militant, and many women's collectives and universities, they really want to be part of a women's movement, but during the late 90s and the mid 2000, there has been difficulty, that there was a real challenges for the women's movement. But around, that is not exact timing, but I just anyhow, I think the 2016 murder case in Gangnam Station, you all know that the Gangnam Style, that Gangnam, so Gangnam Station seems a watershed in the Korean women's movement. So in response to horrific murder of a young woman, 26 years old at the time, in a public toilet, and like a random a murder, and then caused by misogyny, and series of online offline campaigns such as Gangnam Station Exit 10 have been organized by ordinary young women. So here, ordinary, what I meant is, in South Korea, previously, most of the feminist organizing, feminist events organized by professional or full-time feminist activists or feminist organizations and gender studies graduate. But this time, around this time, there were the young ordinary women without any feminist training or full-time activists. They just organized themselves. So online gender wars between young women and male chauvinist bloggers have continued, and that started like 2010. And with the successive the Me Too campaigns elsewhere, but in South Korea, started 2018, and massive street demonstration again in 2018 against hidden filming or spy cam, so-called. That was, men take the part of a woman's body or private part and secretly, and then sometimes they put their camera inside the toilet or inside the bedroom, and they circulate that like a very conservative the male bloggers, or even they sold their films to some pornographic site as well. So, currently, and gender debate, online, offline, have flourished. Oops. So, yeah, I'm not sure about, I can cover all of them, but first of all, anyway, I wanna, examine the what are the broader implications of Gangnam Station murder and Gangnam X10 and hashtag #MeToo campaigns and recent street demonstrations upon feminist activism in South Korea. And also, second, my question is, this new immersed feminist activism or activism, like by young women, this has brought to younger generations a renewed interest in feminism. And what is the characteristic of the new activism? Whether this could lead to sustainable activism. Because as a former activist and also research on feminist activism, I'm really interested in how we make that activism is sustainable. And also, what are their advocacy strategies and tactics? And also another one is whether this new activism, offline and online activism, have served to erode the tensions or conflict between generations of feminists, like young feminists and old feminists. And then finally, I want to ponder whether the new women's movement will emerge out of this the series of activisms, and that will that should be should embracing differences and diverse needs of these young women. And also, such a movement should require a combination of individualism as well as collectivism, because given that their younger generations and young feminism, like currently teens and 20s and 30s, they have lived in neoliberal society, and neoliberal characterized individuality and choices, right? So how can combine that individuality and collectivism? That should be the main task of future feminism in South Korea and elsewhere. Yes, so I know this is not a gender studies course, but just I want to start the definition of post-feminism. So even among the scholars, the concept of post-feminism remains a matter of much debate. And clearly, the term has been used in multiple ways. either an anti-feminist stance or critical stance within feminism, or some combination of the two. But this wide definition, uh, I, I believe that sums up what is the post-feminism, um, like the dominant view on post-feminism. So neoliberal perspective that assumes feminism has essentially achieved its goals, and so it now no longer needed. So like other neoliberal perspectives, post-feminism uh, is a main tenant and main claim that post-feminism is, as I mentioned already, so individuals are free to make their own choices, unburdened by structural constraint based on gender, race, class, or sexuality, and any other categories. So young women seem almost required to engage in heterosexualized and feminized performances to increase their market value and prove that they have abandoned feminism for neoliberal empowerment. So I will give one example later. But like my activism, my period of activism, we are very austere feminists, so I shouldn't wear makeup. And even when I was younger than now, and I look feminine, so my activist seniors, they say, "How come you so look feminine to become activist?" But as you know, that younger generations, current feminists, they really enjoy their femininity and explore their desires and agency. So, and that they can take dancing classes. Even I couldn't have imagined in my 20s, my activist, or early 30s, my activist time, or wears heels and miniskirt as an activist. So and then since women have supposedly gained equality, because even in Australia, there were a number of surveys, are you feminist? But they said, I'm not a feminist, but. So, and then not many young women, or even just middle-aged women, and they don't want to have the feminist tag as their identity. So as an empowered neoliberal subject, young women and open, they avoid marriage and like early motherhood, instead of that enjoy their heterosexualized identity and their agencies. So because of that, as you know, that there was some tensions between the so-called older generations of feminists and younger generations feminists. So how can we, for example, prostitution, like a sex work and pornography is one of the thorny areas. Feminists have a different, divergent views. Uh, and for maybe a couple of you interested in the more further the definition of the post-feminism, so I included a number of scholars here. So McLaughlin say that I have discussed that post-feminism can be understood as a double entanglement of feminist or an anti-feminist ideas. And Jill also say that post-feminism includes both appropriation and disapproval of feminism, and by engaging with the traditional gender norms while partially embracing liberal feminist ideas of equal opportunities and female empowerment. So based on the American media research, and Jill has identified several characteristics of post-feminism. So please, use this one as a reference when you analyze a Singaporean situation or Korean situation, Australian. So femininity as a bodily property, and second, a shift from objectivation to subjectivation, and also emphasis on self-surveillance and discipline, a focus on choice, individualism, and empowerment, and the crucial role of a makeover paradigm. So we can do it. We can, in a few days, we can make our bodies in a perfect body. We can be like a Korean K-pop star within a month as like a project, a self-making project. And celebration of natural sexual difference, like I mentioned, the femininity, instead of oppressing or suppressing the femininity or feminine embodiment. And sexualization of culture, and emphasis on consumerism and commodification of the difference. So yeah, there are a lot of, yeah, we might give more, time to discuss this in further depths, but just for your information, I have included this one. So whether the South Korea was or has been a post-feminism era. So I thought I did, that Korea did. So first of all, when I interviewed feminist activists and those who especially working for rape crisis centers and sexual violence centers, and at the time, they pointed out that South Korea is a crisis in the women's movement. So there were two identified crises in Korea, and one is institutionalization. So institutionalization means, and they started getting funding from the state, and then they lost their role as a critical and radical movement. Rather, they became the like counseling services and social welfare services, and also internal conflict. So interesting, at the time, some activists stated after Korea 1998, Kim Dae-jung, President Kim Dae-jung took the office, and democratization consolidated, and many feminists believe that that is a renaissance of the feminist activism. But on the other hand, they say that this is really crisis in the women's movement. And during that time, instead of a women's movement, many women's organizations, they named themselves NGOs. But one of my interviews said, do you know what NGO means in South Korea? And next, government officers, because many feminist activists became Democrat. And most famous one is Han Myung-suk, and he became, she is the gender studies, Ewha Women's University Women's Studies graduate, but first female prime minister. But other than Han Myung-suk, there are a lot of feminist activists that became like a minister for the something, like current commissioner for the human rights, Korean human rights commissioner. She was a founding member of the first rape crisis center with me as well. So another signs of post-feminism in South Korea is a young women's indifference to feminism and the women's movement. And also, as I mentioned, and when I taught in gender studies, there was a long queue. And then even students came to university early in the morning, like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. At that time, no online enrollment. But during this time, like late 90s and 2010, and they'll definitely reduced popularity in gender studies or women's studies and courses. Yes, so that this is the one example, and they said one young activist in her 20s. She was I met her one of the feminist conference, and she was at the time like a public speaker. And she just say that it has been very hard to mobilize students, and she is one of the feminist magazine on campus. But I cannot blame them. I can fully understand the situation of female university students who are juggling part-time work and study to survive the times of high employment and rate in Korea. And so the professor of gender studies and who teaches women's studies subject at the university, and the same conference I attended, she said that many students who have taken women's studies subject have often said that they have never experienced discrimination based on their gender, and the students seem more interested in getting more certificate to raise their employability than activism or gender equality. So in a neoliberal society, employability is more important, and individual empowerment and individual choice is more important than collective agency or collective activism. And another signs of post-feminism, I thought that was generational schism. And so I mentioned earlier, for young feminists, institutionalized women's movement organization have turned into cheap social welfare services for government, and also often seen as a being co-opted by the government. So young self-identified feminists have turned their back away from institutionalized movement organization, and they also thought that they hierarchical and bureaucratic, not even very relevant to their everyday needs or their desires. So young women, instead of like join the existing organization, they started their own organization, but their organizations is open like online based, or because of that some scholars are hardly visible during that period of time, but there was some young women's activism there, but different format and different way. So 2011 and 2011 slut work movement, against rape myths started in Canada. So I won't detail them where this slug work movement originated. So uh, so this one is a typical good example, although not very successful. And then when I checked whether they still continued, and there is a Facebook group, but 2014 is the last their campaigns. But I have to check with that activist. But on the other hand, this is the significant because almost for the first time, the young women organized this kind of campaign and themselves. And as you can see that in the photos, previously feminist campaigns really, because we're dealing with a serious issue, we haven't thought about it. It always, carrying very serious tasks, but they feel that this is their festival. So after that, there is a menstruation festival, and there was another reclaim the night, the street campaigns. But this is one of the, that kinds of, so ordinary women organize themselves. And also secondly, this is unlike previous activism and campaigns that is more like festivals they really enjoy and brought some, the movie stars and the singers. And Korean society, this is real challenge. You can look at that, but that really want to challenge it, that rape myths. So we can wear whatever we want to, and then no means no and yes means yes. That kind of slogans shouted this movement during these street campaigns. So gender wars and misogyny, this is also another big topic. And recent gender wars on internet and triggered by misogyny comment made by conservative male online groups such as Ilbe. So on the internet, conservative men's groups such as Ilbe with gender trolling. So I don't think I explain all the strategies, and insert hate, threat of violence and rape to deny women's citizenship in general, and also attempt to control and condemn those who go beyond assumed women's roles. So, in 2015, January, a Korean teenager, maybe you might read this somewhere, Korean teenager had tweeted his desire to join the Islamic State because of his hatred of feminists in South Korea. So he also added that now men are more discriminated against by women. So after this post became widely, went viral, and feminist emerged as a most searched term on major web internet portals in South Korea, and instant gave renewed attention, not only women, but men. What is feminism? What are feminists? So meaning of feminism in South Korea. So there are a number of, a lot of numerous examples of gender wars, but this one is K-pop idol Sonnaeun of A-Pink faced a storm of criticism for promoting feminism when she posted a photo of her phone cover that read "Girls Can Do Anything." So if you can buy the t-shirts with the slogans everywhere, but just a K-pop idol show this, slogan, but it happens, and then there is a lot of also Twitters to defend Nan and sending hashtag girls can do anything, like a trending in Korea with 5 separate hashtags. So in the Korea top 20 trends. So yeah, this really turns out like a galvanized also girls' power as well. And another example, also K-pop idol. Another example was, there was a book I will introduce later, the Kyungja Jung, born in 1982. So one of the K-pop idols, she's from Red Velvet, and she said that I read that book, and then the male, like chauvinist and netizens, they say that they promoting, also she promoting feminism, and then they just threat them, they burned a photo. And misogyny in Korea is, extreme case was 2016 murder case of 24, I thought 26, but 24-year-old woman near Gangnam Station in the public toilet. And the offender stated just because of she's woman, and because he feel that belittled by overall the women. So in response to this instance and to also mourn the young women, and the series of online, offline campaigns have surfaced, including Gangnam Station Exit 10. So literally, this post-its, and then people just speak out and in front near the Gangnam Station exit. But these offline campaigns occurred and across the nation, like Busan, Daegu, Gwangju, and everywhere. And then out of this, Gangnam Station X10, number of young women's groups were formed. And also the instance enables online feminists to come to the offline and to make a collaborative efforts with the so-called institutionalized movement. So my friend, I have a close friend, she resigned just January, end of January this year, from the first rape crisis center I founded, Korean Sexual Violence Relief Center. And then at the time, around this time, there was a lot of meetings between older generations, so-called older generation and younger generations. And then because this first rape crisis center founded in 1991, very interestingly, some young, ordinary young women, they didn't know even existence of the Korean Sexual Violence Relief Center. So they started meeting together and they share some strategies and tactics. And this is a photo from, I hope you can feel of that. So this is the Gangnam station. And this is, literally, I translate, Miss Ojini killed her, and then they demanding the new legislation and related to Miss Ojini, like related crimes like this. Yeah. So some of the photos I've got from the Korean Sexual Relief Center, so I should acknowledge that. So three, 35,000, 35,000 and 350 post-it note. But Korea, there was a gender archive library, I think under the umbrella of Seoul Metropolitan City. So they archived all the post-it. So if you can visit it, there is an event, and then you click Gangnam Exit 10 or murder case, and you can retrieve all the messages. And there are a number of at least one book I know out of this event and their messages. So if you are interested in, you can. And as mentioned earlier, around this time and the Gangnam Station murder case, and there is a lot of debate. So in the parliament and also, and then not only if you all Koreans, but if you look at the really, you can see that not only established the activists from established organization, but those who just involved in Gangnam Exit 10 post-it event, and they invited and they share their opinions and so on. So now I should mention online feminist activism. Without mentioning this, we can't discuss the young women's activism in Korea, South Korea, and elsewhere. So 2015, online feminist groups, some scholars and refer them as a third generation of feminists, and they responded the more actively to this growing misogyny via the hashtag I am feminist and hashtag go wild, speak loud, think hard on Twitter and blogging. And one of the famous groups is Megalia, and Megalia members, and they use some tactics like mirroring and parrot misogynistic comment made by those male-dominant web forums such as Ilbe, and replace the words referring to women. So if you are like a linguist or more interested in discursive discourse analysis, and their comment and their postings is so interesting in terms of linguistically. And after that, this online and still going on, but in the middle of this gender wars on the net, and 2018, and the South Korea Me Too campaigns and street demonstrations organized SNS and online feminist groups. So what is the gist of the online gender wars? So one is that the military service. I have some more detailed notice. I want to look at that. So what has misogyny occurred in South Korea? And compulsory military services, all men in South Korea serve 12 2-month service, but women don't have to. So some conservative men's group argue that women don't deserve the same equal right as men enjoy because women don't do the military service. And the second, Second is low fertility rate. It's the lowest in the world. And some men's groups often argue that women don't do their reproductive duty as a mother, as a woman. And also men in general don't feel that women experience gender discrimination. Rather, women enjoy more than men do and all they deserve. So in the competitive labor market, women often perform better than men, and men feel women as a threat to their employability. So and in many areas now women excels as in the sports and art, and so because of that, especially young men, they don't feel that like women suffer some discrimination. And very interestingly, in 1998, Kyungja Jung government established the first Ministry of Gender Equality, but later the conservative Lee Myung-bak government changed Women and Ministry of Women and Family that invoked men to express men's misogyny. They say that if there is a ministry for women, where is the ministry for men? So that kind of like very childish logic they sometimes express. And for your information, this is a South Korea's fertility rate. So I checked this morning, even currently per woman during their the fertility period per woman, only 0.92, so less than 1. And so Singapore, I just the bit of Google, and 1.2. I'm not sure this one is like yeah, updated data or not. In Japan, 1.42. So compared to other countries, and then worldwide, South Korea, the birth rate is lowest in the world. So conservative men's groups such as ILBE, and their aim is maintain traditional gender boundaries and to ensure that women and girls remain to play subservient roles in the society. So this is interesting, so I included in my talk. So for example, the satirical expression of slangs such as soybean paste girls, 된장녀, and kimchi녀 is a continuously invented and circulate widely online and the media by conservative men's online groups and male bloggers. And soybean paste, like media, it defined them. They are obsessed with luxury and vanity. So, and for example, what they say that they just to have a cheapest, most cheap lunch, 된장국, but they buy expensive latte at Starbucks, and that is, some of the description about 된장녀. And hegemonic masculinity can be maintained, cannot be maintained in a situation which most young men cannot easily get a job. So they can't afford to date, like let alone a marriage, three things to give up. So now younger generations, they name themselves 삼포 세대. So I include that Chinese characters if there is any help. So, and or even this day like M4 or generation, or five things of OPPO generation. So date, marriage, childbirth, human relations, and house purchase. So very competitive and like soaring unemployment rate and very competitive market. So men cannot play their assumed roles, like traditional roles as a provider and protector. So they need a target group to blame for their being a loser or failure in the neoliberal society. So I think misogyny is the expression of their frustration, the feeling of a crisis in their masculinity. Yeah, this is the book I mentioned earlier. So yeah, there are like a number of signs of feminist wave. So gender wars and a lot of street campaigns and demonstrations, and like a mid 20, like around 2015 and 16, and almost the like 8 out of 10 bestsellers of the year is feminist essays, feminist novels. And this book is also one of them. So published in 2016 and was translated to more than a dozen languages. And you can buy this one from Amazon.com. And even Taiwan and Indonesia, this book is huge popular. And but on the other hand, this book also played a critical role in triggering another gender war. And as I mentioned, that one of the Red Velvet and also if some K-pop idols or anyone public figures, they claim that I read this book, and then there was a threat or a criticism about they are promoting a feminism or they are feminist. Yeah, also this is I attended also one of the activism, and this is the way, if you read the new wave, new feminist wave and feminism relay, and this is the really one of the way is connect like older generation of feminists and also younger generation feminists, and also they share their strategy and tactics, and they also like challenged by lack of interest among young people, from the perspective established movement. So how they can make their feminism more relevant, also young people, and also young people learn from the history of the women's movement, how the feminist, older generation feminists fought against what they now enjoyed for what they now. Yeah, this is a small, but this is my friend I mentioned that she just resigned from the first Rape Crisis Center in January, and she, yeah, almost 30 years, she was a full-time activist. And then there is a lot of campaigns, 2015, maybe before maybe COVID, and you can see that. And this is the one of the campaigns against sexual violence and like caused by drug and alcohol. And Me Too campaigns. So one of the Korean newspaper, the Korea Times, say that the hashtag Me Too movement in Korea is a historic revolution against the tradition in Korea, one that will be remembered as the turning point from a victim shaming nation to victim supporting one. So key inspiration of the Me Too movement in South Korea is Seo Ji-hyun, the prosecutor. So she revealed during a televised live interview in January 2018. And then a former South Korean Ministry of Justice official, this person, and sexually, harassed during her colleague's funeral in 2010. And after that, this is really opened the floodgate of a number of sexual harassment cases, and arts and theater, education, politics, and religion. So there are a lot of cases women start speak out. And the disgraced figures include former presidential contender, top film director, and Kim Gi-duk. He recently died because of COVID related, and also the Kohn is a very famous poet and nominated for the Nobel Prize for Literature. So this Me Too movement really revealed that sexual harassment and sexual violence is how prevalent or embedded every corner of South Korea. And this continued. So I really want to show, the recent one. So, and powerful politicians also, accused of sexual harassment and sexual violence. So recently, January, so last month, a chairman of the Progressive. So here, we have to focus. Progressive Justice Party was resigned in January because of sexual harassment, the sexual assault allegation. And the former mayor of Busan, also Oh Go-dun, resigned in April 2020. And, many of you might remember, so CNN, New York Times, and Washington Post covered this one. Mayor of Seoul, Park Sun, and, dubbed second most powerful elected official. And some just predict, Park Sun will be the president after Moon Jae-in, but found that after his secretary filed a sexual harassment case in July 2020. So he's a human rights activist and lawyer. And he also, he's my good friend as well. So he supported, special legislation when we founded the First Rape Crisis Center. And also he's the lawyer of Korea's sexual torture case by police officer, the famous case, Bucheon sexual torture case. But so, and another governor of South Chungcheong province, An Hee-jung, and also he's a rising star at that time, presidential hopeful. Also was resigned due to accusation of sexually assaulting, raping his secretary in 2018. Another also campaigns and also achieved what they was the Black protest against anti-abortion. So Korean court the rule, they said that constitution is we should change that legislation, and that abortion related legislation is implemented and 1953. So this is a huge success. So now this anti-abortion legislation, amended and passed, I think early this January. So this is the one of the success story. Yeah. And street demonstration against hidden camera in June 2018. So as a scholar and former activist, I'm really interested in this one. And then this campaigns, demonstrations organized by group the Courage to be Uncomfortable and 불편한 용기, and if I say Korean. So, and then they mobilized the huge audience. That is the largest number in the Korean women's history. But again, they are not trained as a feminist. They are not like a gender studies grade, or they are not like full-time activists. They don't belong to any feminist organizations. So what triggered huge mobilization and this participation still my ongoing question as well. And you can see that, so like young girls, and at the time mostly teens, and yeah, this group, a lot of things about this group, they only allow biologically the female gender to participate in the street demonstration. And also they didn't allow the existing the women's movement activists. They call them 운동충. 운동충 means Korea, some way they use insect. 충 means insect. So so a bit derogatory term. So they didn't allow the existing feminist activists as well. So there is a debate whether, this kind of, so you can see that they fill the street of Gwanghwamun and also Haewha, another area of Seoul. And if you are interested, there are a number of YouTube, so you can feel of how massively the young women and and they as organizers and encourage the participant wearing sunglasses because they want to be filmed again, but also media and journalists are not allowed to, to. And then red color is represented the anger toward this one, and what else? Yeah. So what are the implications of all those, like gender wars, new activism, on, feminist activism, so on? There are a lot, but I just include a number of them. So the first thing we have to focus is that shift from activism organized by existing feminist organizations to activism organized by ordinary young women or feminist bloggers through SNS. And second is their strategy is just sharing and speaking out the struggles they face in gendered expectation, discrimination, harassment, sexual assault, rape, and even that, Gangnam exit murder case. So what I gathered, online activism and also young feminist activists say that serves as a tool for consciousness raising, like a feminist consciousness raising, and also as a conduit and or precursor for offline activism. You heard of, clicktivism or selectivism, but in the South Korean's case, online activism like served more than that. So like the massive demonstration and like anti-abortion and sexual violence and Me Too campaigns, all organized by this online activism. And also online offers a space for resistance and to connect with other young feminists and other feminist activism, including existing feminist activism. And also, a bit, this is the needs more debate, but compared to the existing activism, young women's activism is more into the politics of difference and intersectionality and diversity. And also through this series of activism, young women seems to rediscover the significance of feminist activism and collective action and social change. So many young feminists I met during the feminist conference, and they said that, we didn't know the, you 20 years ago and 15 years ago, the feminist activists got together, they made this, established this organization. So they really not only, individual agency, individual empowerment, but they need some, collective identity as a woman and the collective action. And also many young women, and I found that they say that feminism not an option. They said that this is a survival strategy. And they said we need a feminist language and concept to understand and explain their experiences so that they make their experience sense to them and respond to misogyny, discrimination, and so on. And also the young feminists, they say that the work of feminism remains unfinished. So this is a really big realization, and I believe that, because as I mentioned, they say, I'm not a feminist. I'm not interested in feminist activism. I'm more, like interested in my individual empowerment and employability and my number of specs, certificate for foreign language and so on. So Yes, so I better stop here and yeah, open to the participant. Any questions, and I will answer that.